There's a type of bread that can keep you full for 8 hours without spiking your blood sugar. Not a new superfood. Not a diet trend. Bread real. Bread the way Scandinavians have made it for over 1,000 years. Dense, dark, heavy, made from whole rye grains and seeds. One thick slice at breakfast and you won't think about food until mid-afternoon. But the bread in your kitchen? That fluffy, soft, wheat-based loaf. It hits your bloodstream like pure sugar. Blood glucose spikes to 140, 160, sometimes 180 milligrams DL within 30 minutes. Your pancreas panics. Insulin floods your system. An hour later, you crash. You're hungry again. You reach for another slice. The cycle continues, day after day, driving you toward diabetes, obesity, and metabolic destruction. In 1650, a farmer in rural Sweden ate rugbrød, dark rye bread twice a day, every day. A thick slice in the morning with butter and cheese. Another at midday with smoked fish. That was enough. These farmers worked 10 to 12-hour days plowing frozen fields, cutting timber, hauling stones in brutal Scandinavian winters. And they thrived on it. Historical records from Swedish villages show these people maintaining healthy body weights, strong bones, and low rates of what we'd now call metabolic disease well into their 70s. Fast forward to today. The average American eats bread, daily toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, dinner rolls. Yet 37 million Americans have type 2 diabetes. Another 96 million are pre-diabetic. Obesity affects 42% of the population. We're eating more bread than ever, often marketed as whole grain and heart healthy, but our metabolic health is collapsing. Your Scandinavian great-great-grandmother ate dark rye bread her entire life and stayed lean. You eat whole wheat bread and gain weight. So what the hell changed? The answer isn't that carbs are evil or that bread makes you fat. The answer is that Scandinavian rye bread is fundamentally different from modern bread. It's made from whole grains, packed with fiber, and has a glycemic index lower than apples. And the Swedish farmer who ate 2 slices daily and stayed full for 8 hours. He understood something about grain and satiety that the industrial bread complex desperately wants you to forget. Before we continue, drop a comment. Do you feel hungry an hour after eating bread? Do you experience blood sugar crashes, cravings, energy slumps? Let us know, because what you are about to learn will change how you think about every carbohydrate you eat. Pick up a loaf of store-bought whole wheat bread and read the label. Whole wheat flour, water, sugar, soybean oil, yeast, wheat gluten, preservatives. Sounds healthy, right? Whole wheat. But here's what they do untell you, that whole wheat flour has been milled into a fine powder almost as refined as white flour. The glycemic index of whole wheat bread, 69 to 74. That's nearly identical to white bread at 75. Compare that to traditional Scandinavian rugbrød. Ingredients: whole rye kernels, cracked rye, rye flour, water, salt, sourdough starter. That's it. No sugar, no oil, no preservatives. The glycemic index, 41 to 55. Lower than oatmeal, lower than brown rice, lower than most fruits. But the real difference is the grain itself. Modern bread uses wheat flour, even whole wheat flour, which is milled so fine it behaves like pure starch in your digestive system. Your body breaks it down rapidly. The glucose floods into your bloodstream. Your pancreas releases insulin to store that glucose as fat. Within 90 minutes, your blood sugar crashes below baseline. You feel hungry again. This is called reactive hypoglycemia, and it's the driver of constant snacking, weight gain, and eventual insulin resistance. Scandinavian bread uses whole rye kernels and cracked rye berries. These aren't ground into flour. They're left intact or coarsely cracked, preserving the bran, germ, and endosperm as nature designed them. When you eat this bread, your digestive system has to work to break down those intact grains. The process takes hours, not minutes. Glucose is released slowly and steadily. No spike, no crash, no hunger. Then there's the fiber content. A slice of typical American whole wheat bread contains 2 to 3 grams of fiber. A slice of traditional Scandinavian rye bread, 5 to 8 grams, sometimes more. Fiber slows digestion, feeds beneficial gut bacteria, and creates bulk that makes you feel full. It's the reason you can eat 1 slice of rugbrød and feel satisfied for 8 hours, while 2 slices of whole wheat bread leave you hungry in 90 minutes. And the seed content. Scandinavian bread is loaded with sunflower seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds. These add healthy fats, protein, minerals, and additional fiber. A single slice becomes a complete food. Complex carbs from rye, protein and fat from seeds, fiber to regulate digestion. Your body recognizes this as real nutrition and signals satiety. Modern bread is engineered for the opposite. It's designed to be light, fluffy, and easy to digest, which sounds good, but is metabolically disastrous. The faster your body digests food, the faster your blood sugar rises, and the sooner you feel hungry again. The bread industry doesn't want you full for 8 hours. They want you buying more bread more often. The production process compounds the problem. Modern bread is mixed, risen with commercial yeast in 60 to 90 minutes, and baked. No fermentation, no enzyme activity, no breakdown of anti-nutrients, just fast production to maximize profit. Scandinavian rye bread uses sourdough fermentation over 12 to 24 hours. The lactic acid bacteria produce acids that lower the glycemic response even further. They break down phytic acid, making minerals more bioavailable. They partially digest the proteins, making the bread easier on your gut. By the time it's baked, it's been transformed into something your body can process slowly and efficiently. To understand why Scandinavian bread works, we need to step into a 17th century Swedish farmhouse. Picture a stone hearth, a massive wood-fired oven built into the wall. It's early winter, the harvest is complete, and grain stores are full. A farmer's wife begins the weekly bread-making ritual. She starts with whole rye grains harvested from the family's fields. Rye grows in poor soil and cold climates where wheat fails. It was the staple grain of Northern Europe for centuries, not because it was preferred, but because it was resilient. And that resilience translated into nutritional power. The grains are coarsely ground on a stone mill, creating a mix of cracked kernels, rye meal, and some fine flour. She doesn't sift it. Everything stays in: the bran fiber, the germ nutrients, the endosperm energy. She adds sourdough starter, a living culture maintained for years, passed down through generations. This isn't packaged yeast. It's wild lactobacilli and yeast captured from the air. She mixes in water, a handful of sea salt, and often seeds flax, sunflower, caraway. The dough is thick, dense, almost like wet concrete. She covers it with a cloth and lets it rest for 12 hours, sometimes 18. The longer, the better. During that fermentation, the bacteria work. They consume sugars, producing lactic acid that gives the bread its characteristic temps. They activate enzymes that break down phytic acid, the compound that binds minerals and blocks absorption. They partially digest the rye proteins, making them gentler on the digestive system. And critically, they reduce the glycemic impact of the bread. Studies from Lund University in Sweden found that sourdough fermentation can lower the glycemic index of rye bread by 20 to 30 points. The organic acids produced during fermentation slow down the rate at which starch is converted to glucose. It's a biochemical optimization that happens automatically when you give bread time to ferment. After fermentation, the dough is shaped into dense, heavy loaves, often rectangular or round, 2 to 3 pounds each. No needing to develop gluten aggressively. Rye has less gluten than wheat anyway, which is why the bread is dense rather than fluffy. This density is a feature, not a bug. Dense bread digests slowly. The loaves go into the wood-fired oven, which has been heating for hours. They bake slowly, 60 to 90 minutes, developing a thick, dark crust. When they emerge, they're hard as bricks. In fact, traditional Scandinavian families baked bread once a month and hung the loaves on poles in the ceiling to store. The bread dried out, becoming even denser and harder. You'd slice it thin and eat it throughout the month. This bread didn't go stale in the modern sense soft bread, turning hard and inedible. It was already hard. It aged gracefully. And nutritionally, it became even better. The resistant starch content increased as the bread dried, further lowering the glycemic impact and feeding beneficial gut bacteria. A Swedish farmer eating this bread for breakfast, one thick slice with butter, maybe some cheese or smoked fish, was consuming 40 to 50 grams of slow-release carbohydrates, 8 to 10 grams of fiber, 5 to 8 grams of protein from the rye and seeds, and healthy fats. This combination created sustained energy release over 6 to 8 hours. No blood sugar spike. No crash, no mid-morning snack needed. Let's talk about the glycemic index, because this is where Scandinavian rye bread becomes metabolic medicine. The glycemic index (GI) measures how quickly a food raises your blood sugar on a scale of 0 to 100. With pure glucose at 100, white bread 75, whole wheat bread 69 to 74, rye bread made with fine rye flour 60 to 65, but traditional Scandinavian rugbrød made with whole rye kernels and sourdough fermentation 41 to 55. That's in the low GI category, comparable to legumes, steel-cut oats, and most vegetables. Why such a massive difference? 3 reasons: grain structure, fiber content, and fermentation. First, grain structure. When you mill wheat into fine flour, you're creating maximum surface area for digestive enzymes to attack. The starch is instantly accessible. Pure amylase enzymes in saliva and small intestine break it down into glucose within minutes. Whole rye kernels and coarsely cracked rye, on the other hand, are physically intact. Your digestive enzymes have to work through the outer bran layer to reach the starchy endosperm. This takes time, mores, not minutes. Glucose is released gradually. Second, fiber content. Rye contains 15 to 20% fiber by weight, much higher than wheat at 10 to 12%. And it's a specific type of fiber called arabinoxylin, a soluble fiber that forms a gel-like substance in your digestive tract. This gel slows the movement of food through your intestines and physically blocks digestive enzymes from accessing starch. The result? Even slower glucose absorption. Studies from the University of Kuopio in Finland found that rye bread high in arabinoxylin fiber reduced post-meal blood glucose spikes by 30% compared to wheat bread, even when total carbohydrate content was identical. The fiber was doing the work. Third, fermentation. During sourdough fermentation, lactic acid bacteria produce organic acid, acetic acid, propionic acid, propionic acid. These acids do 2 things. They slow gastric emptying, meaning food stays in your stomach longer before entering your intestines. And they slow the enzymatic breakdown of starch. Research published in the British Journal of Nutrition showed that sourdough rye bread produced 25% lower blood glucose responses than non-fermented rye bread. This is why 2 slices of Scandinavian rye bread can keep you full for 8 hours, while 2 slices of whole wheat bread leave you hungry in 90 minutes. The chemistry is fundamentally different. Now, let's talk about insulin. When your blood sugar spikes, your pancreas releases insulin to shuttle glucose into cells. High insulin levels signal your body to store energy as fat and block fat burning. Repeated insulin spikes, multiple times a day for years, lead to insulin resistance, the precursor to type 2 diabetes. Scandinavian rye bread causes minimal insulin release because the glucose trickle into your bloodstream is slow and steady. Your pancreas releases just enough insulin to handle it. No excess, no fat storage signal, no metabolic chaos. A study from Lund University tracked insulin responses after eating rye bread versus wheat bread. Rye bread eaters had 30% lower insulin levels 2 hours after eating. Over time, this translates to better insulin sensitivity, lower risk of diabetes, and easier weight management. Then there's satiety hormones. When you eat slowly digesting food, your intestines release hormones like GLP-1 and PYY that signal fullness to your brain. Fiber and resistant starch, both abundant in rye bread, are powerful triggers for these hormones. Studies show that people eating rye bread consume 15 to 20% fewer calories at their next meal compared to those eating wheat bread. Not because they're restricting, but because they're simply not hungry. And the gut microbiome benefits are profound. The arabinoxolin fiber in rye bread is fermented by bacteria in your colon, producing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. Butyrate feeds the cells lining your colon, reduces inflammation, and improves insulin sensitivity. Scandinavian populations that eat rye bread regularly have higher microbiome diversity and lower rates of metabolic disease. In 2009, researchers at the University of Kuopio in Finland conducted a landmark study. They gave participants either rye bread or wheat bread for 12 weeks, matched for total calories and macronutrients. Same calories, different grain. The results: the rye bread group lost more body fat, had lower fasting insulin levels, and reported feeling fuller throughout the day. The wheat bread group: no significant changes in body composition, and many reported increased hunger between meals. Another study from Lund University found that eating rye bread for breakfast led to lower calorie intake at lunch, not because participants were restricting, but because they genuinely felt less hungry. Blood tests showed sustained glucose levels for 4 to 6 hours after eating rye bread versus a spike-in crash pattern with wheat bread. And here's the most compelling evidence: population studies. Countries with high rye bread consumptions: Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Germany have significantly lower rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity compared to countries where wheat bread dominates, like the United States and United Kingdom. A 2010 study published in Nutrition, Metabolism and Cardiovascular Diseases found that regular rye bread eaters had 20 to 30% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes over 10 years. Today, functional medicine doctors are prescribing rye bread to patients with blood sugar issues. Endocrinologists in Scandinavian countries recommend it as part of diabetes prevention. And people who switch from wheat to rye bread report dramatic changes: stable energy, reduced cravings, easier weight loss, better digestion. These aren't anecdotes. Continuous glucose monitors show the difference in real time. Wear a CGM, eat 2 slices of whole wheat bread, and watch your blood sugar spike to 160 milligrams DL, then crash to 70 milligrams DL. Eat 2 slices of traditional rye bread, and your glucose rises gently to 110 milligrams DL, stays stable for hours, then gradually returns to baseline. No spike, no crash, no hunger. The shift away from rye bread happened gradually, starting in the 19th century. As wheat became cheaper and more available through industrial agriculture, it displaced rye in much of Europe and dominated in the Americas. Wheat makes lighter, fluffier bread. It rises higher, it's softer, it's more palatable to modern tastes conditioned by sugar and refined foods. By the 1950s, white wheat bread was the standard in most Western countries. Rye bread survived primarily in Scandinavia, Germany, and Eastern Europe, where tradition held strong. But even there, commercial bakeries started adding wheat flour to rye bread to make it lighter and more appealing to consumers raised on soft bread. In the United States, rye bread often means bread with some rye flour mixed into wheat flour, maybe 30% rye, 70% wheat. It's darker and has a slight temps, but metabolically, it's still mostly wheat bread. True 100% rye bread, made with whole kernels and sourdough, is rare outside specialty bakeries. And the health consequences tracked perfectly with this shift. From 1960 to 2020, as wheat bread consumption increased and rye bread consumption decreased, Rates of type 2 diabetes increased 700%. Obesity tripled. Metabolic syndrome affecting 1 in 3 American adults was virtually unknown in 1960. The bread industry optimized for taste and profit, not metabolic health. Soft, fluffy bread cells. It's easier to chew. It makes better sandwiches. Kids like it. But it's metabolically destructive because it digests too fast. Scandinavian countries that maintained their rye bread traditions, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, still have lower obesity and diabetes rates than the United States despite similar levels of economic development. A 2015 study found that Finns consume 10 times more rye bread per capita than Americans, and their diabetes rates are half of ours. The food industry doesn't want you eating bread that keeps you full for 8 hours. They want you eating bread that makes you hungry in 90 minutes so you buy more food. Snacking between meals is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Satiety is bad for business. If you want bread that keeps you full instead of spiking your blood sugar, you have 3 options. First, buy authentic Scandinavian rye bread. Look for brands like Mestemacher, Rudolf's, or Nordic Bakery. Check the ingredients. Whole rye kernels or cracked rye should be first. No wheat flour, minimal added sugar. True rye bread is dense, dark, almost black. It comes in thin slices because it's so filling. 1 slice is a serving. Second, make your own. Rye bread is easier to make than wheat bread because you don't need to develop gluten. Mix whole rye flour or cracked rye kernels, water, salt, and sourdough starter. Let it ferment overnight. Bake it long and slow. The result is dense, filling, and metabolically friendly. Recipes are abundant online, and once you establish a sourdough starter, the process becomes simple. Third, substitute other low-GI whole grains for bread. Steel-cut oats, barley, quinoa, or even chickpeas can provide the same sustained energy without the need for bread. Scandinavian farmers ate a variety of grains, not just rye. Adapt their principle. Choose whole, intact grains over refined flour. The point isn't to obsess over bread. The point is to recognize that grain type and processing method determine whether bread sustains you or destabilizes your blood sugar. If you're tired of blood sugar crashes and constant hunger, hit that like button and subscribe. We're revealing the food truths that keep you healthy and free from cravings.